I would like to give a quick introduction of Thomas. He's the founder and managing director of TH Energy based in Germany, with more than 20 years experience in the energy space, and he's been leading TH Energy now for 8 years. He's been working with a diversity of companies: Clean Horizon Consulting, Innotech Solar, Alstom. His specialty originally was really like microgrids and mini-grids for off-grid renewable energy, especially for industrial companies. And over the years, he's added some skills to his portfolio with a very intense influencing activity, and has been awarded for this several times for being one of the top global influencers on solar and energy topic. And I believe many of you listening today may also know him from the very popular hydrogen group on LinkedIn, which is definitely one of the biggest ones around. So Dr. Illig, I'm really pleased to welcome you today. I will give you co-hosting rights now, so you can also appear on the screen and join us. And thank you very much for accepting the invitation. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, John, for this very kind introduction. Before Innocent has already covered all the polite part, he has thanked the panelists and so on. Let me be the rude German who starts with some self-advertising. John has already mentioned my LinkedIn group, 20,000 members. I hit right now on the return button. If you want to join, here is the link. From now on, I try to behave. I will
invite you and your panelists to also turn on their cameras so people can follow you more easily. Thank you.
Okay. In my case, it's sometimes better not to turn the camera on. I'm just going through a cold, so if my eyes are really red, that is the reason. And I have all the promotion there for the LinkedIn group in the back. Once again, so it could be better in my case to switch the camera off. No, thank you very much again for the introduction. We were supposed to have a very balanced panel. Someone from a project developer, someone from an electrolyzer manufacturer, and a catalyst. In the last minute, we got the bad news that Abdelaziz Yatribi from SCATEC has to cancel. So it will be a panel of just the three of us. Nevertheless, I think that our two panelists that remain are very experienced, and they will also be able to cover the key aspects, or many of the key aspects that are about projects. Let me directly go to the introduction. Eric Dabé, he is Senior Sales Advisor at John Cockerill, a Belgian manufacturer of alkaline electrolyzers. Eric has more than 15 years sales and marketing experience in the field of water electrolysis, especially in the EMEA region. Eric, how much is in EMEA if you talk about your latest experience, and of course you also have 1 to 2 minutes to introduce your person and your company. With I mean Africa, obviously.
Yes, so we have actually some activities in Africa, as you say, Thomas. I guess to date we have probably 10 references. We have delivered a few systems in the steel industry, for instance, as well as in the power sector. And since you leave me a couple of minutes, I will make also a brief introduction of John Cockerill. That will be very brief, but I think this is a good opportunity to give you an updated status about what we are currently doing at John Cockerill. So a lot of activities. We are truly accelerating our activities these days. 2021 was an all-time high year for the company. We have secured contracts for 200 megawatts of hydrogen production, and we have commissioned 150 megawatts of new system. We are also investing quite massively in new factories. So for instance, we are ramping up in China, so we will reach 1 gigawatt of annual capacity by end of this year. Beside that, we are also building a new factory in France. It's a gigafactory, and the first phase will be completed by 2023. And last but not least, we have been joining forces with the leading renewable company Greenko in India. And together we are about now to build a new facility in India to address this interesting market with a 2 gigawatt factory. So a lot of positive things ongoing at Jungletree these days.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Eric. Innocent, before you said AHP, it's an African organization that is based in Africa. Right now, as we have this cancellation on the panel, it's more 3 rather old white men being working out of Europe, talking about green hydrogen in Africa. But it's not that bad. We try really to focus on the Africa aspects. And after the introduction of Frank, I think you won't have many doubts that this will really be about Africa and not about these 3 white men sitting somewhere in Northern Europe being afraid of not having warm apartments or houses next winter. That this is not why we are here. Frank Mischler leads the P2X Hub Brussels, an entity of the German Development Corporation, GIZ, that supports developing and emerging economies in decarbonizing the economies and to use Power-to-X as an opportunity in their climate strategies. Frank, I'm very glad that you're here. I also give you 1 to 2 minutes to come up with a proper introduction of yourself and your organization.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. Thanks a lot, Davi, Eric. Well, the P2X Hub is part of the German Development Corporation, GIZ, which is well known to many of the listeners, I suppose. We are in maybe every African country at the moment with our people, supporting the government and all other actors in many development issues, but also on energy and more on hydrogen. The P2X Hub is the Center of Excellence of GIZ on hydrogen. We provide technical assistance for all the kind of the initial steps to embark on a hydrogen economy, strategy building, institution building, capacity building, but also in the initial steps of defining projects, developing projects, up to when investors take over. And I think today we talk about the latter point.
Thank you very much. If we talk about hydrogen, we sometimes hear very, very big numbers. So just some projects or initiatives. In Namibia, we talk about an investment sum of $9.3 billion US. Let me just remark that the GDP, the annual GDP, obviously, of Namibia is only slightly higher. In Mauritania, we talk about green hydrogen that is initiative that is twice as big, and the GDP of Mauritania is smaller, around $8 billion US than that of Namibia. Is it something that really is linked to hydrogen? To talk about big numbers, Frank, I think you are advising companies or governments, also players in the field. Is it one of your key advices to tell them to go for big numbers?
Well, there's no need to go for big numbers, but of course the big numbers hit the headline and not the small numbers. But I think Innocent clearly showed what we are about to do. Now we are going to change the entire energy system, the entire way we are living. We are replacing all fossil fuels, and this is an enormous market. And if you want to replace that with hydrogen and derivatives, let's not, we talk about that, we should talk about other things and not hydrogen really later on. You need massive investments, obviously. And if you want to bring down the cost, this will work with gigafactories, with massive investments. Does that mean it's the only possibility? No. We have many examples of very small investments that make a lot of sense locally for domestic markets that solve a very specific problem, which might be a very good opening or start for many, many countries or investors that listen here. But the headlines, obviously, is the Mauritania Noor case and NEOM in Saudi Arabia and all the other great things that, yeah, that's quite normal, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We already, or Innocent already addressed the topic of transporting hydrogen. So there is a topic of bringing it right now to Europe. I mentioned it at the very beginning. We are here getting a little bit worried about Russian gas, that we won't have access to Russian gas anymore. And we are hoping for hydrogen as a short-term solution. You mentioned that there could be a pipeline from Northern Africa to Europe, or transporting hydrogen or green ammonia by ships. What would be a realistic time horizon to do so?
Well, there are two pipelines, right? From Morocco to Spain and from Tunisia to Italy. They both have to be retrofitted to be adapt for hydrogen. And it is, of course, true that we don't transport hydrogen. It's a gas, so you transport a derivative. And green ammonia may be the most promising because there are already a lot of production and a lot of use of green ammonia, but not at the quantity that would be needed. So you would need an enormous investment, not only in the production of ammonia, also at the harbors where you receive the ammonia in ammonia crackers, so to put it back into something that is usable, and then this distributed within Europe if you have still this export case. So that's a lot of steps, a lot of investments, and that should have taken many decades if it wasn't for the 8 March announcement of the EU to bring it back all 10 years to 2030. So it is a massive work and a huge challenge for everyone involved in this hydrogen community to do everything quicker. The backbone 2040, which is the infrastructure in Africa that should connect the African continent to Europe, has been brought forward by 10 years from 2040 to 2030. I don't know if this is feasible, but it signals to you the readiness and the huge ambition and motivation of the European Union to make it happen. So I can't give you a date. There's some hydrogen production already now feasible and is working, and you could ramp it up, and green ammonia may be the most promising. Others are a little bit further down the line. If you talk about sustainable aviation fuel, you may wait for another 10 years for a large quantity, not a little bit that we see right now.
Thanks for not giving me any hope for next winter, so I will directly run to the shop to buy some thick jackets. Yeah, and I would suggest that we focus right now when we talk about offtake here in this discussion also very much, as Innocent has proposed, on local or use of hydrogen in Africa. Eric, you are a Belgian-Chinese fusion. You are the new kid on the block, and at the same time the old kid on the block. You are the market leader, if I read your publications on water electrolysis. If we talk about references in Africa, you said you have some, but percentage-wise it's rather small. When will this change? When will Africa be a main market for you? What are your internal expectations?
Well, obviously, we do see Africa as a huge potential in terms of green hydrogen, and this is first of all related to the access of extremely competitive solar energy in the years to come. But as Frank indicated, it is clear that we do rely on financing, investment in all those projects in Africa. But it is clear that we see a huge opportunity. And certainly at the horizon already 25, 2030, we do expect a lot of activities and projects popping up.
Okay. You are doing water electrolysis. Let me quickly, it's a technical topic. We want to focus here a little bit more on commercial topics, but nevertheless. When I post something on social media about hydrogen in Africa, the typical reaction is, or at least one comment is, okay, you want to steal the water from the poor African guys, and then use the hydrogen in Africa. From a technology point of view, you are into alkaline water electrolysis, if I am correct.
Correct.
How does this compare to PEM and to evolving technologies regarding water use, and maybe also to another behavior or another feature that is typical for Africa? We are in a region, in comparison at least to Northern Europe, where you are based, with rather high temperatures. Is there something that, if we specifically talk about projects in Africa, that we should have in mind?
Well, first of all, maybe I could make a brief comparison of PEM and alkaline. I think both technologies have their strengths and maybe weaknesses, obviously. But what we do see in the near future is that the alkaline technology is probably more mature, and also the business case is a bit better when it comes to alkaline, especially at very large scale. So the PEM is coming clearly, and we are following up very closely from our side. Maybe, who knows, one day we will have a PEM in-house in our company. But right now, we do believe that the alkaline technology is a way to go in the next 5-10 years. And I think this is also the conclusion of many reports and studies which have been made lately. When it comes to the site conditions in Africa, it is clear that some regions are really hot. But if you look at the history of alkaline electrolysis, it will tell you that actually quite very large hydrogen production plant by water electrolysis have already been installed in Africa. I'm thinking about this plant in Egypt, nearby the dam in Aswan, where it was built in the 70s, 80s, between 250 megawatt plant. So this is something very, I would say, common. In Zimbabwe also, it was built in the 70s, a 70 megawatt system based on alkaline technology. So this is something I would say very common. Today, of course, we are ramping up, we are developing larger system, improving the efficiency, but we don't see any problem in building large-scale hydrogen production in Africa.
There's a project in South Africa, and the manufacturer says, or the project players say, that the electrolyzers have to be repurposed to produce or to use renewables as an input. Is this something complex, or the repurposing of existing electrolyzers? Something I cannot really, at a more commercial guy, I cannot really imagine what it actually means, this repurposing. I thought, okay, there's electricity as input, and what needs to be repurposed if you want to use these existing electrolyzers for generating green hydrogen.
So you can say until now, most of those very large systems, they have been grid connected. And it is true that at very large scale, it has been demonstrated that you can actually connect both alkaline and the PEM system to a source of renewables. So they can cope with the fluctuation. On the other hand, at very large scale and on a commercial basis, this still remains to be demonstrated. So we don't see a significant barrier that those systems can be developed, obviously. But of course, we will need to work in close cooperation with, for instance, converter developers and renewable energy developers as well.
Thank you very much, Eric. Frank. There, we have mentioned, there's so much talk about hydrogen, the big numbers. And of course, it is at least green hydrogen or powering electrolyzers with renewables is a rather new solution. But why don't we see more massive investments into green hydrogen, or why is it only starting right now? What has changed in recent years?
Why, with all the talk that we have on hydrogen, you could assume we are in the middle of the economic transition already, and that there's a massive market. But it isn't. Most of the projects that you hear about are announcements only, and there isn't any investment yet. Even some of the projects that Innocent mentioned are big dreams, Nur and Mauritania, but there's no finance yet, and they don't build yet. And why is that so? Because I think what we have to explain before we get into this is that there's sometimes by some people a confusion that hydrogen simply replaces oil and gas. So you take out oil and gas, you plug in hydrogen, and the system works like this, continues like this. But it's not the case. No, you now have to. We are talking about very, very different sectors and very, very different products. Hydrogen is hardly ever used. What is used is ammonia, it's methanol, it's e-kerosene, it's e-diesel, it's many other products which is a derivative of hydrogen. So you first produce hydrogen, then you produce the other stuff. This you then can ship and can use and on so forth. But then you have very different sectors. And now, up to now, we talked a lot about exporting to the EU. But in the EU, you have regulations for each of those different sectors. So from the moment that you invest in a plant, you need to know what the off-taker is, who the off-taker is, and what the regulations are. So suppose you produce ammonia and your off-taker is fertilizer, this big company in Spain. Okay, let's sell it to them. And they agree. You wouldn't be able to switch to ammonia for ship fuel later on because it's a different system, different regulation. You need to know, then you wouldn't be certified for it. So you need to know all the steps. Furthermore, in the past or currently, oil is produced by someone in Saudi Arabia, sold to Europe, and they don't have to care what usage this oil will have. Does it land in a car? Does it land in a truck? Is it used for chemical production? Is it used for something else? It doesn't matter. You just sell the commodity at the harbor of Rotterdam, and that's it, out of your business, you get your money. With hydrogen, according to the rules of the EU, you have to know the entire value chain and be green the entire value chain. So when you sell your premium product to someone in Rotterdam and you are below the threshold and it's green, and someone later on in the value chain messes it up because, I don't know, dirty transport or dirty intermediate steps, and it's above the threshold, it's no longer green, so you lose your premium. So you need to be very careful, need to know all the actors along the steps, need to know the off-taker, and that is highly, highly complex in a sector that's not yet established. We are building the market as we speak. The market doesn't exist yet. So this complexity and the absence of all those regulations, because they're still under debate by the European Union, make it very, very difficult to define a good business case where I put those 8.6 billion or whatever huge number you quoted and say, well, I know what I get, because right now you don't know what price you will get. You don't know which conditions you have to meet. And there are simply too many unknowns, hence this huge pressure on the European Union to get more clarity on how this market shall function.
What is your recommendation then? To stay out of the hydrogen market segment? No, I'm just kidding.
No. Well, I just say that if your ambition is to produce hydrogen or derivative and sell it to Europe, be very, very clear about the rules of the game, because you need to know it very clearly. So, for instance, they have this additionality principle. So all the renewable energy that you use to feed your electrolyzer has to be additional. You build it for this electrolyzer. You need to know that, because some assume, well, they just use excess renewable, they have from an old hydro dam, and that's it. No, it doesn't work, wouldn't be eligible. And there are a zillion other details and rules that you need to be aware of. If you're aware of, and if you have a solid business case, by all means, go for it. I think, and I think Eric said it as well, it will take another decade or what until we are there. So use this decade wisely. I think this is the main recommendation. Start now with pilots, something that makes sense in your country for your own economy, and don't think immediately big numbers and billions and euros and export. Learn how to work with hydrogen and derivatives. And once you are very good at it and it makes sense, it is embedded in your economy, and the rules with Europe have been clarified, because in the next couple of years it will be much more clearer. It will be much easier to enter this market, and no worries, you won't come too late. It's such a massive demand. Even if you wait a couple of years, it'll be fine.
I understand that you're not responsible for the big numbers, so you also have more the local perspective in mind. I should have asked this question way before. With whom do you actually work? Do you work with governments? Do you work with companies? As well, with European governments, only with African governments, same for the countryside. So what does your typical day look like? To whom do you do your phone calls? The more you explained, the more I got a wrong picture here.
Oh, no,
In Eric's case is pretty easy. He sells electrolyzers to whoever is willing to pay them, I guess. But I will come back to that in a minute.
Okay. My personal daily job is I sit in Brussels. I try to get to know what the policies and the rules are in the European Union, and to be able to advise anyone outside of the European Union to do business with the EU. And I work a lot on global standards so that we have some harmonization. But as I was saying at the very beginning, the PTX hub, it's like 25 people. We are part of DRZ, which is 20,000 people, and there may be like 300 working on hydrogen day in, day out. And many of them are in Africa. So we have our people in Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Namibia, Kenya, South Africa, you name it, and many countries, and there are more by the day. And so our main work is with the government and state entities to slowly build the system, get a strategy, build the institution, train people, analyze what is the niche of your country, what kind of economy do you already have, where there could be a switch. So many have chemical plants who use hydrogen as a feedstock. Think very domestic, think local, national, what do you need? Then GSZ being a big organization, we have many programs. So I have many colleagues who do this kind of typical work of accompanying an investor or a project owner up to the point where there's a bankable project and he or she can talk to an investment bank or a development bank. We as the PTX Hub, we are one step removed. So we are advising all of those programs in how to do it in the case of hydrogen. So we are thinking more about, okay, what's the complexity? What's the characteristics of a hydrogen investment? Tomorrow, there will be one of my colleagues from the Get Invest project talk about the Get Invest hydrogen window, which is a dedicated investment window for hydrogen and Power-to-X projects, where you can put forward your idea and they will assist you in finding finance. And if it is hydrogen, the chances are they will call us and say, advise us. Is this a solid case or isn't it? And maybe this is the best. I will post the website in the chat box, but it is a discussion for tomorrow, so maybe I shouldn't talk too much about it.
All right. Eric, my apologies. I just described you a little bit as the prostitute of the hydrogen market. I think you do more thorough analysis. If someone comes and wants to buy 400 megawatt of electrolysis capacity, probably this is not where you say immediately, wow, these are my numbers for the year. How do you evaluate projects at this stage if you're addressed, if you get new leads?
Yeah, that's a good question, Thomas. So, and Frank mentioned it, we are obviously talking big numbers in this business. these days. And being an electrolyzer manufacturer, this is some days a challenging part of our business to match the demand with the production. So basically, at this stage, I would say the capacity is not really an issue, because even though we are talking about big numbers in this market, I would say there are sufficient capacity to deliver. So major electrolyzer OEMs are now ramping up in terms of capability to deliver. So they're increasing the production. They are also strengthening the organization so they can cope with the steadily growing demand. So ultimately, the worldwide capacity will go in line with the market demand. However, we cannot deny that there is maybe a risk of capacity shortage at some point. We see that the soaring natural gas prices, the conflict in Ukraine could accelerate the hydrogen economy. And to be completely open with you, we see that already some customers today are a bit concerned about this potential capacity shortage. So some of them have a dialogue with us. They are willing to reserve the capacity, so they really secure the quantity of electrolyzers they may need for their project.
So until recently, the discussion when we talked about hydrogen very often stopped. Okay, it's not efficient. We lose 1/3 or however you do it round trip efficiency to some extent, of course. It's not the efficiency that we should focus on. It's only part of the total equation. In the end, it is about costs. And but what regarding efficiency and in general, what is actually the technology progress in this field? Mm-hmm. You mentioned it's an old technology. What has changed lately? What can we expect in the following years? Also, as investors, does it make sense to wait, or is it a good moment to invest right now? Or is it like in solar, you wait for 1 year and then the prices are coming down rapidly? You know where I'm looking at. What can we expect from the technology or from the electrolysis side?
Let me talk about the LCOH because I think that the LCOH does reflect if green hydrogen is a good business case or not. So the levelized cost of hydrogen, and this is obviously the best way of measuring how we are progressing in this field clearly. So if you look at the LCOH today, this is clear that the capex and the energy are the most dominating parameters and have the highest impact in the LCOH calculation. So to give you a rough idea, the electricity cost on the LCOH will account in most cases something between 50 and 80%. So it is clear that the electricity cost is the main driver for the green hydrogen business case. So we do see that, of course, in the years to come, solar has a huge potential, wind as well, and especially in Africa, if we look at the horizon 2030, we could see price of solar which will go down even lower than $20 per megawatt hour. And this is basically the main driver for the green hydrogen cost, the LCOH. And next to this, we are definitely working actively on the technology. We are improving it. We are moving to lean manufacturing of the electrolyzers. We are securing framework agreements with our main partners, transformer, rectifiers, etc. So we do believe that in terms of capex, the technology will definitely go quite significantly down in the next 5-10 years. But this business is definitely driven by the market demand. So unless we do see those huge projects coming up in the next 5-10 years, of course, that will be difficult to achieve those cost out. But we do believe this is coming. I mentioned it in terms of LCOH, so the electricity has a huge impact. And we are also looking very much at the efficiency of the electrolyzer. So to give you a rough idea, I would say most electrolyzers today, they have an efficiency of in a range of 70–80%. And we do believe that we can improve this by another at least 5, maybe 10% in the years to come. So this will definitely strengthen very much the green hydrogen business case.
Frank, we just discussed about efficiency, and the efficiency does not stop when we have hydrogen in many cases. You talked about green ammonia, and we have a question here from the audience. That's from Moritz Breikman about conversion to ammonia. What are the conversion economics? Are the losses not prohibitive?
Is it expensive? Yes, of course it's expensive. Can I give you a number now? I can't. Our problem is that we have to get rid of oil and gas. Okay, so that's not the comparison we can have. It's obsolete. We have to find something else. Hydrogen is a wonderful business case, and the numbers of the hydrogen cost is going down all the time. And those who follow it see the numbers below $2 a kilo, 1.5. The US want to have $1 per kilo by 1 decade, so intended by 2030. But the hydrogen has to be transported to the point of use. And the most economic, obviously, is the pipeline. But there's only a few pipelines. So for all other production sites, shipping is the best. And what do you ship? I mean, hydrogen to ship is very, very difficult. What is easy to ship is green ammonia, because we know how to handle this stuff. It's a commodity that's traded already for a long time. And yes, then we have to convert it. There's just no other way to do it. I think right now we have a race for getting the best technology for the cheapest price, and everyone competes. It's not yet spoken if green ammonia will be the best solution. It's currently heralded as the most convincing. But let me say another thing. Currently in our mindset is that we have to bring everyone to the user. And I argue a lot that this is not necessarily the case. So if you are able to produce, say, sustainable aviation fuel, the cheapest in Australia and Chile and maybe South Africa, it doesn't make very economic sense to bring this stuff from Australia to the port of Rotterdam and then bring it to Charles de Gaulle Airport and to Heathrow Airport and so on, and fill it in a plane that flies back to Australia. No, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So it would be much better from a global perspective, it would even be better for climate, to use the sustainable aviation fuel where it is produced as closest as possible to it. So in Perth, in this case, or in Santiago de Chile, in the other case. And then have a possibility for a European airline, like Lufthansa, like Air France, to pay the premium, the price, and get accredited for this for the green component of the sustainable aviation fuel. Therefore, they would reach their quota at the cheapest way possible. We would produce sustainable aviation fuel where it is most cheapest, and we would ramp up this market as quickly as possible. It would be beneficial for everyone as long as we created a system that's trustworthy and reliable. So we don't necessarily need to bring everything to Europe. We can think about other solutions out of the box a little bit. I think this is a good moment for it.
How does this translate into industrial applications? Is it a little bit like with aluminum production in Iceland and so on, that the industry, like steel production, will move to regions where hydrogen can be produced most economically? For example, what you mentioned, Australia, or in Africa, where you have the best framework conditions. Is this something what we could expect also?
I mean, it could very well happen. I wouldn't expect ThyssenKrupp to close their factories in Germany and move to Mauritania because the iron ore is in Mauritania, the hydrogen is in iron, so let's produce all our steel there. I don't think it's so easy because you need a lot of expertise, you need access to the market, you need to be close to your consumer. So there are many, many other factors that speak for their current location. But that doesn't rule out that certain primary products are prepared in Mauritania. Iron sponge, for instance, which is a first product that's then used for all kinds of other iron and steel production further down. That would have the advantage that we don't need, I don't know, 5 ships of stone going to Rotterdam, going by train to Duisburg, and they get the iron ore out and get rid of the stones. I don't know what to do with them. And you would have 1 ship maybe, just with the iron sponge. I don't know the numbers, but these things are possible. And I would hope that in this particular case, the steel sector of Germany would be kind of solid enough to be able to cope with this. I don't think that would ruin their business case. I don't think there will be a lot of leakage, and let alone carbon leakage, because there are other mechanisms like the carbon border adjustment mechanism that's placed into it. So I wouldn't be too afraid and wouldn't focus too much on that.
Okay. If we stick to markets, Eric, you told me in our conversation that we had before that for you markets are very important, and that you would like to discuss about which hydrogen markets should we address first in Africa. What are your ideas regarding your question?
Well, I think I will back what Frank already told us somehow. So there are already in Africa some quite significant hydrogen consumers in some industries, and I think that would make sense to address those markets first of all, because producing hydrogen domestically, you will avoid quite significant costs in terms of transport, and that would be an opportunity to decarbonize some of those industrial processes. So I'm thinking about refineries, for instance, the chemist industry, and then obviously ammonia production, the steel industry also, it's a huge opportunity, cement production. So already all the sectors have today a very large carbon footprint. So if you substitute, I would say, only a fraction of the gray hydrogen today that they are producing with some green hydrogen, that would be really, really interesting. So,
but the substitution comes at a price still, so it's not fully cost competitive. What are your ideas? A question to both of you: who should pay for this price difference?
So we were talking about the LCOH earlier today, and it is clear that will be a strong contributor to the business case. But this is probably not sufficient, at least in the short term. And we can hope that there will be also some carbon prices that could contribute to improve the green hydrogen business case. And we already see it, at least maybe not in Africa, but in some other regions. Lately, we have seen that the carbon price have reached a level of $100 per ton in some regions. So this could happen also in Africa and some other places. So I think it's a wake-up call, at least for industrial players today.
Okay.
Question to both of us. So first, there are some cases, they may be rare, there may be niches, where already now it makes more sense to have a power-to-X or hydrogen solution than buying. What comes to mind, unfortunately not an African example, but a Brazilian, but maybe you find an equivalent. There are many airstrips in Brazil where you bring the kerosene by plane to the airport and then to fill it in other planes and fly out again, which is very, very expensive. So it is much better to produce the PTL on site and use it. And that's being done in those airstrips. There may be other cases where now with oil and gas prices being very high, that you reach already the threshold that a green hydrogen solution is better. I think for fertilizers, we are getting close to this point. And then from a state country perspective, there may be other elements which makes it maybe worth looking into it. There's this huge market that you want to exploit, and you have to invest a little bit in the beginning to be able to bring your country to a condition that it can take this market. And that needs some preliminary steps first, no? So you do this. Then there's a lot of talk by some countries to want to become independent from imports, which are very, very expensive, no? Oil and gas imports for any country. And if you can reduce that, that is very, very beneficial. So you put that into the equation as well. So I think it's not a like for like. You just compare a fossil product with a hydrogen product. There are more elements to it for a strategic decision, and it's long term, and there may be revenues later down the line.
All right, we are coming kind of to an end, and I only have covered one question from the audience. At the same time, I'm reading a bit. I think our discussion, what I see there, we have not really talked about desalination yet. In the cost calculations, is desalination, let me rephrase this a little bit, is this a typical part, or is this already covered in cost calculation, or with what kind of water do you do the cost calculation? Maybe to you, Eric.
Well, in many studies, I would say the desalination cost is not included in the LCOH. So usually we start from a ton water, I would say, that is purified and reached the right level of purity for the electrolyzer. So this is clearly an additional cost to take into account. And this is an energy demanding process, clearly.
Yeah. LCOH costs in Africa and in Europe. Okay, I think it's a very complex question. It depends, I guess, on the specific locations, also in Europe where you are. I think we don't have the time to cover all the different cases here right now. Can you imagine to build electrolyzers in Africa in the future? I think we've covered that. Maybe not the very large ones today, but in the future, definitely. What about the load factor of a typical green hydrogen system? So what do we have to achieve? I think here it's close to achieve an LCOE close to the grid. Okay, maybe in general, a more general question, how is the load factor driving the business case? And from my point of view, I come from microgrids in the very beginning. If you combine their wind and solar, for example, you can obviously increase also the load factor and the utilization then of, if we talk about hydrogen, of the electrolyzer. Is this something which we will see more often in the future?
I guess so. I think it makes sense definitely to improve the load factor. That will strengthen the business case moving forward. And we are talking sometimes solar, wind. I think a combination of both can be also a winning concept in some regions, at least.
Yeah. Then there's a question about small-scale solutions. I think they are the players who think big, like John Cockerill, and then there are other companies that think more small. I think they're very specialized players also for rural microgrids, for example, to kick out lithium batteries. Would you go for hydrogen, Eric, or not? Is there direct competition, what you say, in many cases for powering, for example, remote villages between hydrogen and lithium-ion batteries?
Well, as you say, I'm maybe more specialized in the large-scale business, but I do see applications actually for both batteries and also hydrogen in those for residential applications. So I do see that batteries are also getting better and cheaper, and they are working properly with a decent lifetime. On the other hand, small electrolyzers are also getting more competitive, fuel cell as well. So I think there are definitely a market for both of them.
And then there are sometimes combinations where you use batteries in the end to increase the load factor or to make better use of the electrolyzer. I know some cases here in Germany where basically you use the battery before the electrolyzer.
Correct.
This is maybe also an aspect, as long as the prices for electrolyzers are still pretty high. Of course, you would say they are not high anyhow. Yeah, what else? How can governments start in terms of taking advantage of the new hydrogen economy? Sorry. To mute myself, maybe it's Corona. So governments, Frank, you're Mr. Government. You talk to governments, you work with governments. I think you're already in our discussions. Many of many things that have been asked here, we kind of addressed already in our discussions. But if you have two recommendations for governments in Africa, what shall they do?
I mean, they shouldn't lose any time to learn as much as possible about hydrogen and power to X, and start by anything that makes sense nationally. Any sector, any use case that is currently in use in this country or makes sense to be in future, start with this, learn as much as possible, get your network in order, look for possibilities outside your borders, and then go for export and big gigafactories later on when you have done the first steps. Because at the beginning, there will be many, many lessons to be learned. If I was the head of a government in a country, I would maybe let the United Arab Emirates learn the first lessons and then use those, and you know what I mean? Yeah, but think locally. I think that's the most important.
Very good. What about approvals? There's a question about more on the total regulatory framework. If I want to produce, let's say, somewhere near the coast in Africa, green hydrogen, what kind of approvals do I need?
Depends who you want to sell it to and what you are producing. I mean, this is one of my first interventions. We are not talking about hydrogen. We are talking about many different sectors. So know what you want to produce and who the off-taker is and where this off-taker is. And if this off-taker is in the European Union, you know the rules there, and you need a certification for this. And then you just call those guys to suit and certify, and God knows who, and they do it for you.
And more on the production side, really not worrying. You've made that point very clear in the very beginning about the offtake side, but on the production side, more local regulation, let's say, in the African country. What do you look at? Are the, maybe it's not written here specifically, are the countries ready for hydrogen generation, or do you have to come up with a total new regulatory framework for producing hydrogen?
So, question for me?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, maybe country specific, really. As long as you produce for your own country, you maybe don't need very ambitious certification methods, but I don't know. Right, sorry, I raised the question. Maybe Eric has a good answer.
I play the ball to Eric.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
When it comes to the production, I mean, even though hydrogen today is produced at large scale from fossil fuel, let's say, to be completely clear, I mean, hydrogen production is something that we know pretty well, even though it's not by water electrolysis. So there are a lot of SMR which are built all around the globe. So of course, this is very much state regulated, and we will need to work out also regulation in every country, because now we are going to rebuild those very large-scale hydrogen production plant, dry water electrolysis, but obviously this will not be an issue. The work just has to be done, obviously, per country.
Are there any certifications or something you need? I think many in the audience, it's a solar industry, AFSIA is a solar industry association, no certifications from PV modules that you have to respect. Is there something comparable for the electrolyzers?
Yeah, I mean, each region has its constraint in terms of regulations, obviously. In Europe, we will work very much with ATEX directive, for instance. In the US, that will be another one. So you see this may vary from region to region, but I think this is something that we have to look at and develop in every single country.
Thank you very much. If I have a look at the time, we are 1 minute over. We started a little bit later also, but we got one panelist less. So I think it's a good moment to be back on track and to hand over to John with not being much too late. Thank you very much to the panelists. It was a great discussion. The two of you also gave very valuable insights into the project business. So it was my pleasure to have moderated this. I hope you did not suffer too much from my nasty questions.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.